Hi, this is Sarit Switzer, and welcome to the It Is Taught podcast, a podcast devoted to the teachings of Rabbi Shner Zalman of Liadi as recorded in his most famous work, the Tanya. My hope for this show is to make these teachings accessible and relatable to the average person, regardless of prior Jewish education or affiliation. The episodes follow the prescribed daily study portions and are meant to serve as practical lessons in how to live your life as your true self and develop an authentic and powerful relationship with your Creator. I have personally experienced the effects the study of this work has had on me, and I'm excited to share what I can of this knowledge with you. So please join me on this journey of learning, self-growth, and connection with your source. Welcome to the It Is Taught podcast. This is a special bonus series entitled, Why is the Whole World Against Us? The purpose of this series is to offer a deeper spiritual insight into the current war that Israel is waging against Hamas in Gaza, as well as the geopolitical war Jews all around the world are waging in defense of our right to the land of Israel as our homeland and against worldwide anti-Semitism, which has risen exponentially in the aftermath of the October 7th massacre. The teachings I'll be relating are based on a Sicha given by the Lubavitcher Rebbe in the year Tafshin Chaf-Vav, or in the Hebrew year of 5726, or the English year of 1965. And the Sicha is on Parshas Breishis, based on the first Rashi in Parshas Breishis. I studied and recorded this material in the merit of a swift victory of the IDF and the protection of all of our fellow soldiers and all Jewish lives within the land of Israel and throughout the world, as well as for the speedy return of our hostages. May it happen very, very soon. So I just have to say that I know that I said that we'd get right into the Sicha today, but before we get to that, I have to share with you guys my astoundment at what happened over Shabbos. So I had published part 1 of this series on Thursday. Now, Friday I was really busy getting ready for Shabbos. Shabbos comes in pretty early these days. Saturday night, Motzei Shabbos last night, I turn on my phone and check my email, my notifications, everything. And I see a barrage of comments on my video on part 1 of this series, Why is the Whole World Against Us, as well as a total of over 900 views. For context, I'm really grateful for all of my regular fans of my Tanya podcast, but I do not usually get 900 views, especially not overnight on one single episode. So this definitely piqued my interest, and I took a look at the comments, and then I quickly regretted it because most of these comments, unfortunately, were extremely negative. Many were actually very nonsensical. Many were quite vitriolic against Israel, against Jewish people. So I, as fast as I could, I deleted all of the comments, and I actually changed the settings on the channel so that all of the comments need to be moderated by me going forward. But what I thought was really interesting about this is that here I am, recording a series about why the whole world is against the Jews. And I get actual evidence to support this within a couple of days, which is really amazing. I've heard this from other people too, that it's like, they'll post something about the rise in anti-Semitism or an anti-Semitic incident or something like that. And then somebody will comment about how that person is being paranoid and then retort with like some anti-Semitic remark about how they're just a money-hungry Jew looking for attention or something like that. So it's pretty amazing, and it really just encouraged me to continue with this series and really made me realize why these teachings are so apropos to what's going on now in the world. And actually we're apropos throughout all of our history. History really repeats itself. Nothing changes. There's nothing new under the sun, as Shlomo HaMelech said. And we as Jews, because to be clear, this episode, now that I know that maybe 900 or more people are going to be listening to this in a couple of days, there may be a lot of non-Jews listening to this. I want to make it very clear. This series is for Jewish people. You're welcome to listen in, but the messages that I'm giving over here are clearly intended for Jews. I'm putting it out there into the world because I think that it's important that these teachings are accessible and that they're out there in the world, but the message is for the Jewish people. And the message is for us to know how to respond to these comments that we get, to these people that claim that we are occupiers, that we stole the land of Israel, that we have no right to the land of Israel. So with that being said, let's get straight into it. Let's dive into it. I gave a whole episode already, the last episode, that was this whole introduction to the context of this, why it's so important. Today, we're going to get into the actual discussion. So as I mentioned, just as a quick review, is that these teachings that I'm going to be giving over, they're not my own. Everything that I give over on this podcast, I'm taking from somewhere. It's not just like my own ideas. This is going to be based, as I said in the intro, on a Sicha of the Rebbe that the Sicha gave over, based on the first Rashi in the Torah. It's a very, very famous Rashi. And speaking of the number 900, this was a Rashi that was written over. Rashi is the foremost commentator on the Torah. For those of you that aren't so familiar with that, it's impossible really to study Torah without Rashi. This is one of the things that really separates Jews, religious Orthodox Jews, from other types of religions that also may study the Bible. We never just study the Bible. We don't just like sit and read the Bible just like that without commentary. We always have a commentary, specifically Rashi. Rashi is like the basic commentary that we use when we study Torah. So this Rashi that we're going to be studying was actually written over 900 years ago. And as we'll see, the foreshadowing of this Rashi is really amazing, because he really foreshadowed that there was going to come this time in the future, which is now, we're living it right now, that the nations of the world are going to come to us and they're going to say that, call us robbers. They're going to say that we stole the land of Israel, and this is how we need to respond to them. And then the Rebbe, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, is going to actually dissect this Rashi into a lot of details in terms of the question, in terms of the answer, and really give us some deeper insights into all of it. Now, a couple of things that I want everybody to keep in mind from the get-go before we get right into the text is that, in spite of the fact that the bulk of the Sicha really deals with the land of Israel and the subject of the ownership of the Jews over the land of Israel and how to respond to the nations of the world, the actual thesis of the Sicha, which the Rebbe begins and ends with, the actual takeaway that the Rebbe wants us to take away from the Sicha, actually is not directly about the land of Israel. It's actually all about learning Torah. The message that the Rebbe wants us to take away from the Sicha, as we'll see, is to learn Torah, and to see this as a guide in how to learn Torah. Now, I think this is interesting in a couple of ways, because first of all, the Rebbe, as well as many other Gedolim that I've seen, have spoken about the power of Torah study and how learning Torah can be a really, really valid and powerful tool to fight in a war. If you can't physically wage battle, if you can't physically be a soldier, a way to wage the spiritual battle is by learning Torah. Which brings me to my next point, which is that everything in this physical world has a spiritual counterpart. So if there's a physical world down here, it means that there's a spiritual war going on. And yes, we need to do things by way of nature. We need to wage the physical war, but we also need to wage the spiritual war. The spiritual war is just as important, and is sort of like not only a mirror, but and not only a reflection, but it actually is really the root of it all, because everything comes from that more higher spiritual place. Which is why, in my mind, learning the Sicha is so pertinent to right now while we have this actual war going on in Israel. Because if the way the Rebbe is telling us to fight the spiritual battle is by learning Torah, so this is a perfect way to do it, because we're learning Torah that is extremely relevant to the situation, because it's all about the land of Israel. And as we'll see, and as I mentioned in the last episode, it's a very intricate Sicha. There's a lot, it's very academic, you could say. There's a lot of back and forth, a lot of thought process. It's not a simple Sicha, as we'll see. So as I mentioned, it was a huge project for me to go and learn the Sicha and translate it. It was a very big undertaking that took a lot of time. So that's why this is a series. It's not just a one shot, here's the message and there we go. But I want us to actually relish this experience instead of getting frustrated by it and being like, okay, what's the takeaway? Just tell me the main point. No, we want to actually get into the study. We want to study for the sake of learning, for the sake of using our minds, using our tools of analysis, using our tools of comprehension and thinking and questioning and all of those things in the service of this higher purpose of learning God's Torah. So through this experience of actually learning about the land of Israel and our ownership over the land of Israel, not only are we gaining actual tools to know how to answer the nations of the world, but the very process of learning about these things is actually waging the spiritual battle. The other big takeaway that we'll get to as we get deeper into the Sicha that you'll see is, as I mentioned, since everything has a spiritual counterpart, everything physical down here has a spiritual counterpart, that means that when the nations of the world come to us and they have these accusations and they call us occupiers, they call us robbers for stealing the land of Israel, it means that there's a spiritual counterpart to this as well, which means that when we approach them and we defend ourselves and we get into debates with them about, who was there first, how we actually decolonized the land. We didn't colonize the land as those people accuse us of, how we tried to give them so much land in the past. We tried to create a Palestinian state only to have it been thrown back into our faces. All of these arguments and debates, as we see, they never work for some reason. Yes, they're logical. Yes, they're sensical. Yes, they make sense. But there's somehow we're never convincing anybody. Somehow we seem to be held not only to this like absurd standard, but it doesn't even seem to be a standard. It seems like this isn't a logical discussion at all. Which, as we'll see, there really is something deeper going on. This accusation that they have against us of being robbers, of being occupiers, what's really going on? What are they really saying? And that's what we're going to learn about in the Sicha, which is really a very fascinating, to me, this was the most fascinating part of the Sicha, is that exact point. So I'm not going to give it away now, but stick with it and we will get there. And I think it's really important to know this, because if you're debating somebody in any situation, if you're having an argument with somebody on any level, you really want to get to the root of what's really going on. Let's say even if you think about like an argument you have with your spouse or with a friend or something like that. Let's say they're upset that you showed up late and you're always late, or they're upset that you didn't remember your birthday. Really, very often, if not always, it's not about the lateness. It's not about the birthday. There's something deeper going on. And we want to really figure out what is that deeper thing going on. And until we can get to that deeper thing, until we can figure out what that deeper thing is, we can't really address the issue. We can't really solve the problem. And that's what the Sicha is really going to be all about, is really getting to that deeper place of understanding what are they really saying? What is this accusation, stealing land? What are they talking about? And once we know that, then we can know how to respond, not only to them, but to ourselves as well. So with all of this being said, let's get straight into it. And I'm going to begin today actually by citing the first Rashi, first in Hebrew, because I think it's nice to kind of hear the original Hebrew, and I will translate as I go. All right, so here we go. So the very first Rashi is, it's on the word Breishis, which is the very first word of the Torah, which literally means in the beginning. In the very beginning, the Torah begins with, and God created the heaven and the earth, etc., and it goes on to speak about the story of the creation of the world. So Rashi takes this word Breishis, and he says, Breishit, אמר רבי יצחק, לא היה צריך להתחיל את התורה, אלא מהחודש הזה לכם. So Breishis, in the beginning. So Rabbi Isaac asked about this. Shouldn't the Torah have began with HaChodesh Hazeh Lachem, with the blessing of the new month? So first of all, so just to break that down, even right here. So Rabbi Isaac, so who is this Rabbi Isaac that Rashi is citing? According to some commentators, including the Siftei Chachamim, this is actually a reference to Rashi's father, who was named Isaac, Yitzchak, and he was a winemaker. And this was like kind of like a nice way for Rashi to insert his father, like to kind of give respect to his father in his writings. And, you see in Rashi's own name, you can see the name of his father. So Rashi is an acronym actually for Rabbi Shlomo Yitzchaki. So Rabbi Shlomo, and then the last name Yitzchaki is, in those days, came from Isaac. So his father's name was Isaac. So Rashi is citing some Rabbi Isaac. It could have been his father, but it may not have been. And Rabbi Yitzchak is asking this question, what shouldn't the Torah have began with the blessing of the first month? And then Rashi goes on and he says, Shehi mitzvah rishona shenitztavu ba'Yisrael, because this is the first commandment that the nation of Israel was given. So the very, very first commandment that the Jews were given when, after we received the Torah and we became a nation, the very first commandment that we were given was to bless the new moon, to bless the new month. So Rashi is asking, shouldn't the Torah have began with that? But umatam patach b'Breishit. Why did it start with Breishis? And then Rashi answers his own question. He says, Mishum koach ma'asav higid la'amo latet lahem nachalat go'im. And this is a citation from Tehillim, chapter 111, which translates to mean the strength of his works he related to his people to give them the inheritance of the nations. She'im yomru umot ha'olam le'Yisrael listimatem, that if the nations of the world will come to the Jewish people and say, you are robbers, shekavashtem artzot shivat go'im, because you conquered the land of the 7 nations, hem omrim lehem, kol haaretz shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu hi, then they should say to them, the Jews should say to the nations, the entire land is the land of God. Hu bara'a unatzna la'asher yashar be'enav. He created it, God created it, and he gave it to whom he deemed proper in his eyes. Biltzono natzna lahem, with his will he gave it to them. Uviltzono nitla mehem unatzna lanu, and with his will he took it from them and he gave it to us. So that's the whole Rashi. So there's a lot there. And, I want you guys to really try to keep this in mind. As I mentioned, I actually have a written component to this whole podcast episode that I'm doing. So I highly encourage you to print out the written portion of this that I linked to in the show notes here to follow along, because we are going to be referencing this Rashi a lot. And it's really helpful to have the text in front of you as we go through this. Okay, so putting aside that particular Rashi for a moment, the Rebbe actually begins his Sicha by going into a more general discussion about Rashi and who Rashi was in terms of a commentator, what role he played as a commentator. So we know that those of us who learn Torah on a regular basis, as I mentioned, you cannot learn Torah without Rashi. It's one and the same. It's like maybe the lahavdil, the way that we can kind of liken it to is sometimes in a lot of Shakespeare books, you'll see this. Like I know recently I actually read King Lear by Shakespeare, and it's super old English, and I actually made sure to get a copy of the book that had commentary on the side that explains these terms that are just completely foreign to us in our modern day society, that things that we just don't reference anymore, references and terminology and things like that. So it's a similar thing when it comes to Rashi. Rashi isn't there like a lot of other commentators on the Torah are there to kind of give added explanations and deeper insights and what it's really hinting at and how there's like a deeper story going on or something like that. The purpose of Rashi is merely to serve as this kind of dictionary for the text. It's kind of like just really simple, basic explanation. It's meant to be comprehensible for a 5-year-old. So that's what Rashi is all about. And Rashi himself says this. He says in the same Parshas Breishis, but a little bit later, in chapter 3, verse 8, which, by the way, for context, is all about, it's the part of the Torah where Adam and Eve ate from the tree of good and evil, which they weren't supposed to eat from. And then they hear the voice of God calling, and they go and they try to hide amongst the trees in the garden. So Rashi says over there, he says that there are a lot of midrashim, there are a lot of agadas, like there are a lot of other stories that go with this that explain deeper meaning what's going on. But then he says about himself, he says, "Ve'ani lo bati ela l'pshuto shel mikra," so that I just came to give over the simple literal meaning of the text. This is what I'm here for. He's clarifying his role in the commentary on the Torah. So this is something that all of us know, all of us that are familiar with learning Torah, pretty much amongst all sects of Judaism that study Torah seriously, know this about Rashi. Know that his commentary is all about understanding the literal, simple meaning of the text. However, what is perhaps less known, says the Rebbe, is that actually contained within these very simple explanations, these very simple commentaries, are actually the most secret and deepest parts of the Torah. Something which in the Zohar is referred to as Razin Doraita, the secrets of the Torah. And the Alter Rebbe, in fact, which is the founding Chabad Rebbe, the first Rebbe of Chabad, he actually referred to Rashi's commentary on Chumash, as being the wine of Torah, Yena Shel Torah in Hebrew. And we can kind of understand this because, how does somebody create wine? Is that you take a simple grape, and through pressing it, through extracting it, that's how the wine comes out. There's also this whole idea that nichnas yain yotze sod, if a person drinks wine, then the secrets come out. So there's something about wine that's very much connected to hiddenness, to secretness, to deep, deep, deep ideas. And And basically what the Rebbe is telling us here is that Rashi's commentary, yes, it's very simple. Yes, it's very literal. It's just there to give us that very simple meaning, but contained within these teachings of Rashi are extremely deep teachings on the Torah. Now, the next thing that the Rebbe points out, before even getting into too much of the content of what Rashi is going to be talking about, is that whereas many other commentators, most other commentators, in fact, provide some kind of introduction to their work before they actually get into the work, Rashi doesn't do this, at least not explicitly. Like our first introduction to Rashi is pretty much this Rashi on the Torah, which is his teaching. It's not like hi, my name is Rashi, and this is my style. This is, what you should look for when you're learning my commentary. And this is the angle I took and things like that. No, he gets right into the teaching right away. But the Rebbe says that what if we looked at this very first teaching of Rashi and actually saw it, that this is actually Rashi's introduction to his teaching? How so? Well, the Rebbe points out something very interesting is he says that, aside from before we even get into the content of what Rashi's telling us here about the land of Israel and the nations and all that stuff, we see that what Rashi is really focusing on here is the order of events in the Torah. He's asking a question about it. He's saying, why did the Torah have to start with the story of creation as opposed to the Torah beginning with the blessing of the month, the commandment to bless the month? So the Rebbe interprets this as telling us that Rashi is actually teaching us how to learn Torah. He's actually telling us how to go about it. He's saying that first we should learn the simple meaning of the text, which is kind of like the story of the creation of the world. It's like, there's a world. This is kind of like the basics, laying the foundation. And only then, after learning the simple meaning of the text, can we then go on to really try to understand the deeper aspect of it all, the deeper meanings, the secrets of the Torah, which in this case, going back to Rashi's commentary, would be the blessing of the month, like meaning like the mitzvahs, what the purpose of the world is. Like there's a world that's kind of, the kind of basic baseline. And then there's the mitzvahs, which is how we elevate the world, how we find deeper meaning in the world at large. Okay, and now to get into the actual content of the Rashi itself. So Rashi's commentary on this Breishis can be broken down into two parts. There's the question and then there's the answer. So what's the question? The question is, why does the Torah begin the way that it does? Why does it start with the story of creation instead of starting with the first Jewish mitzvah? So why is this a question at all? I mean, we'll get much deeper into it as we go through the text, but on a simple level, the Torah is meant as a Jewish book of commandments. It's supposed to be a guidance book that God gave us at Mount Sinai in how to live as Jews, what we need to do as Jews, keep Shabbos, keep kosher, things like that. So why does the Torah in that case begin with the story of Breishis? And then Rashi's answer, which is the second part of his commentary, is that the reason for this is that it's giving us guidance into how to reply to the other nations of the world. Okay, so that's the intro that you really need to keep in mind as we go through this. And now we're going to really dissect this a lot. We're going to see how the Rebbe actually dissects this Rashi even further. And he says that, yes, okay, there's Rashi's question. And then we have Rashi's answer. But contained within Rashi's answer, we have the accusation of the nations. And we have our answer to the nations. And then there's Rashi giving this whole thing as an answer. And the Rebbe is going to ask questions about all of these things and try to come to a deeper understanding about all of these things, about what is Rashi actually asking in his question, like why, because as we'll see, each one of these things are seemingly problematic as we get into it. The Rebbe is going to have a lot of questions about every single step of this Rashi, every step along the way, whether it comes to Rashi's question, Rashi's answer, the accusation of the nations, and our answer to the nations. Those are the four things that we want to keep in mind. And then after really coming to a deeper appreciation of this whole Rashi, we'll see how all of this can actually lead us to a deeper appreciation of the land of Israel and our connection to the land of Israel as Jews, how to learn Torah, which we touched on a little bit, and the Torah itself. So it's going to be a long journey. I don't know how many episodes are going to be in this series, but I know it's going to be more than just this one as a part 2. And so let's see how far we get today. So for today, we're going to begin with questions on Rashi's question. So the Rebbe has two questions on Rashi's question. The first of which actually comes from the Ramban. So it's not actually the Rebbe's question, it's the Ramban's question. And he says that the Ramban questions why Rashi is asking this question at all, about why Torah began this way. He says, isn't learning about how God created the world pretty essential? Like, you would think so, right? We know that one of the most foundational things as a Jew is to know that God created the world. And somebody who doesn't believe this is considered to be a heretic. So is Rashi really supposing, implies the Ramban, that we should just not talk about the creation of the world? Like, this is something as Torah observant Jews, we need to know that God created the world. It's pretty foundational, right? And then the second question that the Rebbe asks is, he says that, if we're going to have this question about the story of the creation of the world, why not ask this question about all of the stories in the Torah? There are a lot of stories in the Torah that are not commandments. Right now in the Torah portion that we're reading, we're learning about the whole story of Yaakov and Esav and Yitzchak, and how they got married, how they had children, all these things. It's a bunch of stories. So why do we learn these stories? If Rashi really feels that Torah should just be like a list of laws for the Jewish people, why have any stories in them at all? Right? So those are the two questions. The first question is, isn't the story of creation pretty foundational and something that we really need to know? And secondly, if the issue is with it being a story and not like an outright commandment, there are a lot of stories in the Torah, not just this one. So why is Rashi just picking on this one? And is his complaint actually about all the stories in the Torah? Next, where the Rebbe dissects Rashi's answer. So to review, Rashi's answer is that the reason that this story of Breishis is placed in here is to give us the answer, to give us Jews the answer to the nations of the world who come to us and call us robbers. So the Rebbe has three questions on this. The first question is that, okay, if this is, and it sort of follows the last question on the question that we had, which was about the other stories in the Torah. So the Rebbe says that if it's true, as Rashi says, that the reason that this story of creation was put into the Torah is to give us an answer for the nations of the world, that's the only reason why it's in there. So is this why all the stories are in there, or are all the stories just there to give us answers for the nations of the world? And then another issue that the Rebbe brings out from Rashi's answer is that Rashi's whole issue with his whole focus on the blessing of the new month, saying this is the first commandments the Jews were given, and it really seems like it should have started there. But wait a minute. There are actually commandments that were given before the blessing of the new month. It's true. We only officially became a Jewish nation when we received the Torah at Mount Sinai in the year 2448. However, we were actually given commandments before then, and we're taught that our forefathers and their descendants, the tribes, they all kept the Torah. And we actually see explicitly in the Torah that certain commandments were given. We see that the commandment to be fruitful and multiply, for example, was given. That was given to Adam and Chava in Gan Eden, in the Garden of Eden. We also see that there was the commandment of circumcision that was given to Avraham. We spoke about that just a couple of weeks ago in the Parsha, if you've been following along the Parsha. And then we also see another commandment, the commandment of the Gid HaNeshin, not eating the sciatic nerve. This was given to Yaakov after he battled the angel running away from his brother Esav, who was trying to kill him. This is coming up in Parsha coming up soon. So we see that there are actual mitzvahs that came up before the blessing of the new month. The blessing of the new month was not the first commandment that features in the Torah. So why doesn't Rashi mention these at all? Like, why does he focus so strongly on this blessing of the new month, and he dismisses all these other mitzvahs? And now the third question that the Rebbe asks on Rashi's answer is that, okay, so Rashi's answer, he tells us that, okay, the reason why we need Breishis is the story of Breishis is in order to give us this answer to the nations of the world. But so then, couldn't there just be the story of creation? Fine, that's our answer to the nations of the world. And then jump right to the blessing of the new month. What about there's a lot of stuff that goes on in between in the Torah? The blessing of the new month only features in the 12th chapter of the book of Shmot, which is the second book of the Torah. So there's a whole book of Breishis and part of the book of Shmot that comes in between the story of creation and the book of and the blessing of the new month. So Rashi doesn't address that. He gives a reason in his answer for the story of creation, but he doesn't give an answer for everything else that comes after that. So those are the three questions that the Rebbe has on Rashi's answer. And I think that this is where we're going to end today. And I'll give a little recap of this in a moment. And I know it can be frustrating to learn this. It's like all we're doing is like we're just getting more and more and more questions. We're not getting any answers. We're not really getting any closure here. But again, I want you guys to bear in mind that really what we're doing here is we're learning Torah for Torah's sake. And yes, knowing the answers to these things, knowing how to answer the nations of the world is important. It is very essential. At the same time, remember, the Rebbe started this Sicha telling us about the importance of learning Torah. And as I've mentioned, this is learning Torah for its own sake, for the sake of really understanding God's word, is a powerful and valid way to fight the war, the spiritual war that is being waged now against evil in the world. So that's what we're doing together. So it's try to kind of let go of the end goal in this process and try to really sit with the questions and really use your mind, your analysis to powers of analysis to focus on the questions, really try to understand the questions to the best of your ability. So to recap, I'll give you guys a recap of the questions now again. And then until the next episode, I want you guys to try to sit with these questions. Think of them. What do you make of these questions? Do you have any possible answers for them? What Rashi was thinking when he asked the question, when he gave the answer? What do you think is really going on? Do you have some questions of your own based on these questions? Maybe you want to discuss them with a friend or something like that. So again, to recap, we have Rashi's question. Rashi's question is, why did the Torah begin with Breishis instead of starting with HaChodesh Hazeh Lechem, with the blessing of the new month? And the questions that the Rebbe asks on this is, he says, first of all, this is the Ramban's question, is he says, isn't learning about the creation of the world very essential? It's pretty foundational, right? And the second question is, if we're going to have this question about the story of Breishis, we could have this question about all the stories in the Torah. So why does Rashi specifically hone in on the story of Breishis? And then we have Rashi's answer. So Rashi's answer is that in short, it's that the reason why Breishis is there is to give us an answer to the nations of the world when they accuse us of being robbers. So then the three questions that the Rebbe brings out about this answer is, he says, if that's the case, are all the stories in the Torah just answers to the nations of the world? Second question is, there are actual mitzvahs that come about in the Torah before the blessing of the new month. So, why is Rashi not addressing those? Why does he just start with the blessing of the new month as being the first mitzvah? And 3, if we want to go with Rashi's logic and say like, okay, so yes, there's a reason for Breishis because it's an answer to the nations, and so good. Now we can move on. Why not move on then straight to the blessing of the new month? Rashi doesn't address everything that comes between that, between Breishis, the story of creation, and the blessing of the new month. So those are some questions for you to sit with until next time, and I look forward to learning more with you in the next episode. So stay tuned for that, and I will speak to you then. Thanks for listening to the It Is Taught podcast, hosted by Sarit Switzer. This podcast is dedicated in loving memory of my maternal grandfather, Avraham Yitzchak ben Binyamin HaKohen of blessed memory. Music by Shoshana. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to support the show, please share it with others and subscribe on YouTube, Apple iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And make sure to leave us a 5-star review. To find out more about the It Is Taught project, including more information on my soon-to-be published book, please visit our website, itistaught.com. To catch the latest from me, follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Looking forward to speaking with you tomorrow, and until then, have a great day.